This is team night, so I'm not going to preach at you, but I am going to talk to you. And I want to just unwrap some thoughts about, well, more specific about Mosaic. I want to tell you a little bit about our church in LA, our community, our values, our focus, and maybe some things that might be transferable to you here as you guys move together as a community of faith. You know, when I went to LA almost 30 years ago, I went to Los Angeles because I looked at the world and I tried to map out how history was unwrapping across the world. I don't know if you ever realized that the whole world is not in the same moment in history. That you can travel to different parts of the world and you can go 500 years in the past. Or you can travel to another part of the world and then go almost like 100 years into the future. So if you travel to Tokyo, you've just time traveled into the future, right? If you travel to Syria, you've traveled 1,000 years in the past. And as you travel to different parts of the world, you realize, like in the United States, if you go to New York, you're stepping into the future. If you go to Iowa, you've just stepped back into the past. Anywhere in the Midwest is still in the past. And when you meet people and you have conversations with them, you realize they're not living in the same time in history that we're all living in. And as I looked at the world, I began kind of breaking down that each domain of humans has a capital. Like in the States, New York would be the capital of finance and money. Washington, D.C. would be the capital of power. Detroit and Chicago are the capital of industry. But Los Angeles was the capital of the future. And when I looked at where to move in the world, the reason I moved to Los Angeles is because I wanted to be wherever the future is being created. And one of the things you can even realize when you look at your own city in KL, there are different places in this city where the future is being created for this city. The future is not emerging in Kuala Lumpur evenly. The future is not emerging evenly across Malaysia. The future is not emerging evenly across Asia. And so you have to begin to step back and go and wonder, where does the future come from? How does the future emerge? And how can the church, instead of being a symbol of the past, be actually a catalyst for the future? Because really the church, wherever she is, should be the epicenter of the future being ushered in. Because we're the ones connected to the God of the future. The only person touching the future right now in the purest form is God. And he pulls us into the future and wants us to be creative agents in the future. So I went to LA because I wanted to be a part of creating the future of humanity. And I wanted to make sure that the church was creating that future as well. But a part of, for me, that really affected me and shaped me was when I came to faith in Jesus, I didn't know anything about Christianity. I didn't know anything about the church. I just knew that I'd had this life-changing encounter with the creator of the universe, and that I had this unbelievable realization that Jesus was his name. And finding that connection was so much easier than connecting to the church. And I don't know if any of you have ever had that experience where connecting to Jesus is just easier than connecting to people. Right? You ever hear people say, I don't like the church, or I hate the church, or I don't believe in the church? You know, church is just another word for a group of people. So when a person says, I hate the church, what they're actually saying is, I hate people. I don't connect to the church, I don't connect to people. See, when you say church, you're actually talking about the people of Jesus. And one of the great problems is that we've made it so difficult for people who come to Jesus to connect to the people of Jesus. And we even make it more difficult for people who don't know Jesus to connect to Jesus, because the people of Jesus seem to be in the way of Jesus rather than showing the way to Jesus. And a huge part of the journey for Mosaic was simply trying to shift the church from being in the way of Jesus to being the signpost, the guiding light, the bridge to Jesus. The church should actually be a portal that transports people into the presence of God, where people can meet Jesus in the most beautiful of ways. And people say to me, yeah, but people can meet God anywhere and anyway. I said, of course they can. But there is a difference between having to take the stairs and taking the elevator. And the church is supposed to be the elevator where you step in and you're translated right into the presence of God. And that for me is pretty exciting. And a part of what I began to realize is that it wasn't really just the church's problem, it was my problem. Have you ever been in a room with people where you just didn't fit or didn't connect or just felt like you're not even speaking the same language? Years ago, I learned about this whale. And there's this one particular whale, they don't even fully know what kind of species the whale is. It's some form maybe of a blue whale, they're not sure. And the reason they do not know what species the whale is that there's only one whale in the world in its pod. There is no other whale in the world that matches its species. That whale is called the loneliest whale in the world because the whale travels the ocean, and I don't know if you know, but whales communicate through a frequency. So they let out this frequency, and other whales hear that frequency, and that's how they find each other. And they hear the other whale's frequency, and that's how they know there are whales coming. And so whales actually find each other because they communicate in a common frequency. So while we craft words and sentences and paragraphs and chapters and books, whales simply communicate through a frequency. But this one particular whale communicates at 52 hertz, which is different than any other whale in the world. All the other whales in the world communicate in the same frequency, but this one whale cannot hear the frequency of any other whale. And no other whale can hear its frequency. And when I heard about this whale, I suddenly felt like I understood myself. You ever felt like you're just 52 hertz and no one gets you? Or maybe you're trying to connect to God and you're trying to connect to the movement of Jesus and you're trying to connect to the church, but the church is just not communicating and connecting at the frequency at which you were created. See, one of the things we began to realize when we started Mosaic was that it didn't matter how many churches were around us, we were never going to reach the same people that other churches reached. Have you ever noticed that most churches, no matter what they call themselves, whatever denomination or whatever kind of movement they are, they essentially all communicate in the same frequency? And a lot of times the way you know that is that you have a guest speaker, he says something and everybody cheers. Like one time I was speaking in Melbourne at Planet Shakers, and as we were driving the Planet Shakers, the person in the car said, "Hey, when you get to the event, we just want you to know when you speak truth, people are going to really respond." And I said, "What do you mean?" He said, "You know, when you speak truth, they're just going to cheer and really lean in." And I said, "Are you trying to tell me that when I say something, they already believe that they'll actually start cheering and clapping and amening?" They said, "Yes." And I said, "That doesn't really work for me. When I say something, people get really quiet, and they're not really sure if it's right. It takes them a little while to process it and think about it. I get kind of the opposite response. When I talk, it gets quieter, not louder. And you know what the great temptations is? To say the things that get you louder. Because I know how to get you louder. Praise God. Come on now. Let's give the Lord a clap offering. Come on. Come on. Isn't Jesus in the house? What's that? Praise break. See, we have a common language inside the church, and when everyone starts responding to that, you're actually moving to the frequency where people without God least connect. And one of the great challenges when we started Mosaic was how do you create a community where the frequency actually resonates with authenticity to an unbelieving world? And it cost us a lot. We had Christians who really were upset because we were not the right frequency. And Christians would come and visit Mosaic and say, "There's just something off about Mosaic. It doesn't feel right." I said, "Oh, it's because you're around humans. You're only used to being around Christians." But Christians have their own language, and it's insider language to let everyone know when they're an outsider. And what happened really in our experience is that we had to go through a process of eliminating the language that let the outsider know that they did not belong. Years ago, when I was speaking at an event, they had translators, and the Korean translator, when I was speaking, stopped translating me in the middle of the message. And the leaders of the Korean churches sent other translators to see if the translator was okay. They thought maybe he had a heart attack or something. He just stopped. And they went back there and asked him what's going on. And he said, I can't translate him. They couldn't translate me into Korean. And all the other translators were working with him to try to translate me into Korean. And they came to me later and said, would you come to Korea and speak in Korea, but we need to work on finding you a translator who can translate you. I said, well, what's the problem? I said, we don't know how to translate your language. We've never really heard your language. I said, oh, it's called English. See, you're used to translating Christian. And in Korea, there are virtually two different forms of Korean. There's Korean Korean, and there's Christian Korean. And I said, all you need to do is find a person who does not believe in God, and he'll be able to translate me. If you want to understand a little bit of what shapes Mosaic and what makes Mosaic different, is that we have ruthlessly eliminated all the cliches and all the jargon and all the insider language. And we force ourselves to communicate every aspect of our faith, every aspect of our spiritual journey, every aspect of our experience with God in a way that a person without God can still understand. And that language is so much harder, isn't it? Anybody here a parent? You guys are so young. You're all children. Anybody have a parent? Okay. It's amazing the way a parent talks to a 10-year-old, or the way a parent talks to a 5-year-old. You don't usually walk up to your 5-year-old and say, it's really essential for you to eat the right food groups so that you can receive the right nutrition and vitamins so that you can grow up to be a healthy adult. Usually just say, eat your vegetables. And what's happened in the church is that we've created a language that we think is actually an elevated thinking, but it's actually a more superficial thinking. It's always amazing to me. I don't know if this is true here, but in LA and in the States, we'll have Christians go to church and go, hey, I want to go deeper. Where do we go deep? And I meet Christians who've been Christians 25, 30, 35 years saying, I want to go deeper here. Where do I go get discipled? I'm like, you've been a Christian 30 years. If you still need to be discipled, you're broken. It's just never going to work. Because after 30 years, you shouldn't be looking to be discipled. You should be looking for who you can disciple. Because the deep things of God, no one else can take you there. You have to go there yourself. And the deeper things of God do not make you less relevant to an unbelieving world. They make you more relevant to an unbelieving world. You ever notice how we use the Bible language and pretend it's biblical? Like, I don't, again, I think it's amazing there are churches that are called like, Bread of Life. You ever heard of a church called Bread of Life? Yeah. Because that's so relevant, right? Or like Living Water. There's a lot of Living Water churches. Because we take language in the Bible and we actually think that's biblical. But you know how ridiculous that is? See, Jesus he said, I am the living water. But he was talking to a Samaritan woman who was standing next to a well. You see how clever that is? He was next to a well. She was getting water. He said, I'm the living water. It was relevant to that conversation. And then we make it biblical. So living water is the Bible term, and we use it even when there's no well. See, they were handing out bread. And Jesus said, I am the bread of life. Because there was bread there. And then we put a sign on our buildings, bread of life. No, that's a building. And we expect people without God to make sense of that, rather than a principle for communication that says be relevant wherever you are. Use the language of your people. So Jesus talks about being a shepherd and us being sheep. And so we spend the rest of our lives talking about how we're sheep and Jesus is the shepherd, except I know this is really hard to pick up. There were sheep there. And people actually had jobs as shepherds. You see how that works? And how many people are employed at the present time as shepherds? Anybody here work as a sheep, just in case? I want to cover everything, all right? And so what's happened is we actually convinced ourselves that being biblical meant being irrelevant. And so we took on a language that was obsolete because we didn't understand what Jesus was doing. See, we don't need to be using the words Jesus used 2,000 years ago. We need to be using the language that Jesus used, which was the language of the people. So when we named our church Mosaic, we didn't put church on it. And I get so much negative feedback. Why aren't you calling yourself a church? Are you embarrassed of being a church? Kinda. And I'm embarrassed by a lot of churches. I'm just going to be straight up. Sometimes I don't even want to be identified as a human. I'd rather just be a giraffe or something. But, you got to work with what you are. And I just called it Mosaic. And people would say, why don't you put church on it? And I said, well, because you put church on it for Christians. Because Christians are looking for a church. Humans are looking for a community. And besides, I wanted to do an experiment. That if we don't say we're a church, will people without God eventually say we're a church? I don't wear a sign that says, hi, I'm Erwin the human. I'm hoping you'll quickly narrow down all the options and go, human. But with the church, we're so worried that we're not actually a church that we have to tell everybody we are. It's just like Christian. We say, I'm a Christian. No one said that. No one actually said they were a Christian in the Bible. You want to be biblical? Lost people, unbelievers, pagans called Christians Christians. See, it was the outside world that called us Christians. Now we call ourselves Christians and they call us hypocrites. The whole conversation has changed. It doesn't matter what we call ourselves, it matters what they call us. And we need to live a life in such a way where they look like Jesus. And I think that's the church. I think that's where Jesus is. And so we began Mosaic, and we used Mosaic because it was an image. It was an art form. It's universal. An art form of broken and fragmented pieces that are brought together by an artist to create something beautiful, especially when light strikes through it. See, we wanted to say, look, this is who we are. We're broken and fragmented people brought together by the master artist to create something beautiful, especially when his light strikes through us. And so we didn't name ourselves for ourselves. We named ourselves for the world. And we just began to remind ourselves the church isn't here for us. We're the church, and we're here for the world. So much of our language gets cool, but remains irrelevant. And so we name our churches after Greek names. But that's only relevant to Christians. It feels cool to us, and it feels irrelevant to the world. There's this place in the scriptures, two of them. One is a place where there's this guy, and he has to tell this really powerful person that he's done a really horrible thing, and he needs to repent. But if he tells him this guy is so powerful, he might kill him. Have you ever had to tell someone something they didn't want to hear? So what does he do? He tells him a story. He says there was this man who came into town and he needed to be fed, and this very, very cruel landowner who had thousands of sheep took one sheep from a man who only had one sheep and slaughtered that sheep instead of slaughtering one of his multitude of sheep. And you might know this is Nathan talking to David. In fact, the story says like this. There were two men in a certain town, one rich and the other poor. The rich man had a very large number of sheep and cattle, but the poor man had nothing except one little lamb he had bought. He raised it, it grew up with him and his children. It shared his food, drank from his cup, and even slept in his arms. It was like a daughter to him. Now a traveler came to the rich man, but the rich man refrained from taking one of his own sheep or cattle to prepare a meal for the traveler who had come to him. Instead, he took the ewe lamb that belonged to the poor man and prepared it for the one who had come to him. Instead, he took the ewe lamb and he killed that one. David burned with anger against the man, and Nathan said to him, as surely as the Lord lives, the man who did this must die. He must pay for that lamb 4 times over because he did such a thing and had no pity. And then Nathan said to David, you are the man. This is what the Lord, the God of Israel, says. I anointed you king over Israel, and I delivered you from the hand of Saul. But he took another man's wife when he had an entire harem of concubines and wives. See, how do you tell King David, when you're a prophet, that he had sinned against God in a way where David wouldn't kill him, but also David could actually see that it was his sin? He didn't just walk up to him and say, David, you're a sinner. You've sinned against God. He just tells him a story and helps David see himself in the story. See, a part of what we began to realize at Mosaic was not only was the language of the church irrelevant, but it wasn't compelling either. That we had lost the ability to tell stories that help people find themselves in the middle of them. And we just assume that people know the things that we believe rather than helping them experience the story of God in their life. And so one of the things we work really hard at Mosaic is sharing the scriptures in such a way that even the person who does not believe sees themselves in the story of God. We don't only talk to those people who believe, we talk to everyone, whether they believe or not. And one of the things I've discovered over a lifetime is that if a truth is only relevant to Christians, it's not a truth at all. When something is the truth, it's relevant to everyone, and it pierces their heart. One of the beautiful things that has happened at Mosaic 2 years ago on Easter, we didn't do this last year, we did a little survey on Easter Sunday, and we had people turn on their phones, and I said, if you're an atheist, and you would say, I'm an atheist, but if God were out there, I'd love for him to find me. I want you to turn on your lights right now. And we had over 1,000 people in Mosaic who said, I'm an atheist, but if God were out there, I'd want him to find me. And love the fact that at Mosaic, we have so many atheists who come. And I ask them over and over again, why do you come? And they go, we're not really sure. But the story you're telling about who we are makes sense to us. In fact, 2 weeks ago, we baptized. And I was just walking through, there were all these people soaking wet, and we baptized spontaneously at Mosaic. And this guy stopped me, his name was Jordan. He goes, hey, can I talk to you for a minute? And I said, well, I don't have much time, but sure, go ahead. And he goes, I'm an atheist. And I noticed he was wet. And usually we like to baptize people who are not atheists. But I thought, okay, that's okay. And he goes, I'm an atheist, and I'm just a little distressed. I don't know what to do. I have so many questions. I said, you're an atheist? He goes, yes. And I said, but you just got baptized. He goes, yes. I said, so did you give your life to Jesus? He goes, yes. And I realized he came in as an atheist, and he was so shocked that he chose to believe in God and give his life to Jesus that he was still calling himself an atheist who believed in Jesus. And a part of it is because we've created a language where the outsider knows they belong. And we've been saying for years, you don't have to agree with us to be with us. You don't have to believe to belong. And we just tell people, look, if there's no God, we can't mess up your life. But if there is a God, it could change your life. So why don't you just hang here and see what might happen? We've learned how to tell the story the way Nathan talks to David. And let David see himself in the middle of that story where he knows he needs God. And then with Jordan, I said, you're feeling really distraught, aren't you? Because you're an atheist who now believes in God and gave your life to Jesus and just got baptized. And that's a lot for an atheist. And he goes, yes, I don't know what I'm feeling. I said, let me explain. My mind can run faster than my body. Do you know that your mind can run faster than your body? So I can be over there, but I'm still here. I'm on my way. It's going to take me longer. See, your mind moves faster than your body, but your soul moves faster than your mind. And when I told him, I said, look, George, what's happened is your soul has had a life-changing encounter with Jesus, and your mind is running to catch up. I said, but don't worry. Your soul's already there. Your brain's going to catch up soon, and then your body's going to catch up as well. And pretty soon, all of you is going to be transformed by Jesus. My hope and prayer as I see what's happening here is you become a place where you don't use biblical language to pretend you're biblical. You don't use language that makes everyone an insider and makes clear to the outsider they don't belong, that you become a community of 52 hertz. That you learn how to communicate to the soul of those people who are desperately searching for God, but they can't make sense of faith. Where you begin to tell the stories in such a way that everyone sees himself inside of the story of God. And they come to know him because they realize, and one of the things we say all the time, I said, don't worry, even though you don't believe in God, God believes in you. And long before you ever came to know God, God already knew you. He's just waiting for you to catch up with him. And then there's this other place where Paul is coming into the city of Athens, and it says, while Paul was waiting for them in Athens in Acts 17, he was greatly distressed to see that the city is full of idols, so he reasoned in the synagogue with both the Jews and God-fearing Greeks. Now, I always thought this is odd. It says that Paul was distraught that the city of Athens was full of idols, and then it says, so he went to the synagogue to preach to the Jews and God-fearing Greeks. Now, you know what's odd? If you're going to reach the Greeks in Athens, the last place you should go is the synagogue. Because even if you reached everyone in the synagogue, it would leave Athens untouched. And it always struck me that even though Paul had a burden for the city, he started in the wrong place. And a lot of times what happens is we say we want to reach our city, we say we want to reach our nation, we say we want to impact the world, but we keep going to the safe place, to the synagogue, to talk to the people who are like us. The reason Paul went to the synagogue is he felt comfortable in the synagogue. He was a Jew who was also a Roman, so he understood the Jews and the God-fearing Greeks. He didn't really feel as comfortable talking to the Athenians. They were the outsiders that he didn't know how to talk to them about Jesus yet. He was still figuring that out. I was watching this TV show one morning with my wife called The Today Show, and I heard this person on the television. I wasn't really watching. I was getting dressed, and the show was on, and I heard this person say, in a minute, when we come back from commercial, we're going to talk about relationships. I thought, oh, I should learn about relationships. That would be good. And so I waited, and then afterwards, it wasn't what I thought. I said, hi, ladies. We're going to talk about relationships. We're going to talk about how to attract a man. I thought, that's not really relevant for me, but how do you attract a man? So I sat down, and I learned how you attract a man. And this relationship expert said this, ladies, if you want to attract a man, when you're talking to him, begin to mimic his facial characteristics. As he sees his facial characteristics in your facial characteristics, he'll be instinctively more attracted to you. And as you continue to speak, begin to mirror and mimic his hand movements and arm gestures. Because the more he sees his hand movements and arm gestures in your hand movements and arm gestures, he'll be more attracted to you. As I'm listening to this, I'm thinking, what she's actually saying is that men are so narcissistic and egotistical, they're only in love with themselves and they're looking for the female version of them. But that's not my point. My point is that instinctively we tend to be attracted to people who look like us. We tend to be attracted to people who move like us, who think like us, who smell like us, who talk like us, who think like us. And so the great danger of being us as the church is that we only are attracted to people who mirror us. And actually, Jesus is in love with the humanity who does not yet know him. And so when we started Mosaic, we really started in a nightclub that the artist named Prince used to own. And we started in this club that Prince owned, and we did it for our friends who didn't know God. And we made a commitment that we would be authentic and transparent and relevant, that we would use a language that everyone would understand, that even our most profoundly spiritual moments would always be aware and connected to the person searching for God. We did it in such a way where we decided that what was really important is for us to have meaningful conversations about what it means to be human. Because you can talk about God all day long and people might say, I don't know if I believe in that. But the moment you start talking about what it means to be human, people know, how do you know this about me? How is it possible you can understand me so well? And the power of the scriptures is not just what it tells us about God. The power of the scriptures is what it teaches us about ourselves. And the more we understand how to be human, the more we will see in us the image of God. So one of the things we do at Mosaic is we really focus on using human language and speaking to the human need, to the human soul. But the other thing that I think is so beautiful, and it connects to your conference, is that we made a decision early on that Mosaic was going to be about human creativity, that Mosaic was going to be about creating the future. Because you see, if you don't believe in creativity, you cannot create the future. Because the future doesn't just come, the future is created. The future isn't waiting for you, the future is waiting for you to create it. And what happens so oftentimes is that Christians think that the future is already set, that the future is already determined, that the future is already destined. And so we don't actually live our lives creating, and that's actually what God created us to do. And so early on, what we did at Mosaic is one of our core values is creativity is the natural result of spirituality. And we began to integrate the language of being spiritual with the language of being creative. The reason every human being is creative is because every human being is spiritual. Every human being is spirit, even though they may not be aware of it. Every human being is created in the image and likeness of God. Every human being has been imagined by God, and they've been given the capacity to imagine. Every human being has been created by God and been given the ability to create. And so the church should be the most creative community in the world. We should be the epicenter of human creativity. And the greatest teachers and doctors and architects and writers and dancers and filmmakers and poets should be coming out of the church. And we should set the standard across the world of human creativity, artistry, and beauty. The church should be known around the world for its commitment to the good and the true and the beautiful. And one of the things that's really inspired me while I've been here is just to see those kinds of values and the essence here, that kind of commitment in Pastor Kevin and Esther, that kind of movement here. Because let me tell you, the future belongs to the creatives. And if you will begin to dream and to risk and to create, you will begin to discover the power that God has placed in you to create a new world. I love being a pastor. I didn't know I'd ever love being a pastor, but I love being a pastor. Because to me, when you're a pastor, you're actually given the opportunity to pull together a tribe that together creates a future that only God could imagine? What would happen if all of us believed that the church is the epicenter of the future? That the church is the epicenter of human creativity? What would happen if we believed that every human being was creative and that our role and our responsibility was to nurture and develop and unleash the creativity inside of every human being? Can you imagine how people would be running to church? They would put their children in our children's programs because they would want their kids to have the advantage of this creative environment. They'd want their teenagers here because here their teenagers would actually begin to imagine and create and discover their full potential and capacity. And there's some of you here, you sense it inside of you that there's potential that you can't seem to tap. There's greatness inside of you waiting to be awakened. And the beautiful thing about the church is that it's in the context of the church that the most beautiful, powerful you can be awakened and unleashed. I'm going to stop here and see if Pastor Kevin wants to come up and have just a few minutes of conversation. Thank you guys so much.
Thank you, sir. Thank you, Pastor. Wow, come on, let's give Pastor Erwin one more big hand. I'm going to post something on the Instagram afterwards that the whole weekend is just summed up in one word: mind blown. 2 words, one word. I got to know Pastor Erwin about 2.5 years ago because my team heard you speak, and they were so excited. They sent me the video, and then I watched it. And I want to say to everybody, I've probably never made public. In the last 2.5 years, I only listened to your messages.
Thank you.
Simply trying to reorganize my words, my languages, because I think jargons, sometimes Christian jargons just doesn't make sense to non-Christian. But Pastor, we also have the privilege of going to Mosaic twice. And the team, everybody, they're just so engaging to all the new friends. So if we want to build a culture, like trying to create a future, build a culture, where should we begin? Because we are not a new church. We've been around for quite long, 17 years. But how do we try to build that culture among our people?
What I found even just in my own life and in our community is that the best way to be aware of the culture you need is to bring a friend with you who doesn't believe in God.
Okay.
Because have you ever gone to a movie and it makes you cringe? Because you're like, it just feels so awkward? Or have you ever gone to a movie with someone else and it makes you cringe because you're wondering what they're thinking while you're watching the movie? Yeah. Like we went to see Crazy Rich Asians yesterday.
I can't believe my first movie with Pastor is a chick flick, but anyway.
Yeah, and but like when they started talking about white people, Pastor Kevin started feeling really awkward. I told him, I said, I'm Latino, I'm okay, but you know, my son, he's pretty white. And,
We're not Americans. I want to kill myself in the cinema.
So like when you go see something, like I talked to my wife one time years ago. She thinks I watch too much violence. And so I took her to see a movie, I think it was called The Patriot, and with Mel Gibson, and it was a little violent. And on the same day, I talked her into going to sing Gladiator, and I told her it was a love story. And afterwards, she was really upset. Okay. And I said it was a love story, the love of a man with his sword. And, but when I'm watching the movie with her, I'm suddenly aware of all the violence. When I'm by myself, like, I'm kind of unaware of it.
Right.
But when she's there, I'm seeing it through her eyes. See, a part of the problem, the people who hate change in the church, the people who resist relevance in the church, they never bring an unbelieving friend that they love.
Wow.
See, the people who bring someone they love who doesn't know God, they cringe when we say the wrong thing. They cringe when the worship song suddenly says something so odd and weird and irrelevant. They cringe when something happens in the service, right?
Yeah.
Because now you're seeing it through the eyes of your friend who doesn't know God. So basically, at Mosaic, you don't get any influence if you don't bring your unbelieving friends. You don't have a voice in our future, in our culture, because you don't see it through the right eyes.
Right.
Because you don't see it through the eyes of Jesus. So I said, first thing is, you got to bring your friends who don't know God.
Yeah.
And maybe like ask them, hey, look, we're actually trying to become relevant and not like fake and not like weird. You know, and we realize that we don't know anymore what weird is because we've got so weird. And so, you know, that we think it's okay. And say, but you don't believe in God, right? No. Okay, could you come and like let me know how many times it's just like really weird to you? and they'll be like, you're seeing eye human for blind Christians.
Yeah. Yeah.
And so what I'd say is like, you need to begin to create a culture of invitation.
Yes.
So that everybody brings unbelieving friends and then begin to have that conversation.
Come on. I'll be most happy we put this into practice this weekend. Is that cool? And I honestly, Pastor, find it like, you know, when I hear your talks, when I'm driving my son to school and in the morning, and then when I finally share stage with you like this and talk to you, I cringe myself, some of the words that I keep using, because I find if you are invited to a business meeting, you don't have to alter any language, any words that you use.
No, that's right, because I mean, Spanish was my first language.
Yeah.
And then I learned English.
Yeah.
But I never forgot human. And so when I became a Christian, I started learning Christian really fast. Right. It's like a virus. It is, amen? Praise God.
Yeah.
Glory to Jesus.
Yeah.
Right? Come on. Let's,
yeah.
Right? I mean,
yeah.
It's just so contagious. And let me tell you, as preachers, this is the problem. We have such high ego need. We really need your love.
Yeah.
And if you only cheer when we say cliches, we're just going to cliche away.
Yeah.
And if you actually like it's okay to break out in applause because that's what happens at great concerts.
Yeah.
And, you know, it happens at great football games. It happens, you know, even in great movies. And so it's okay to break out in applause. It's okay to cheer. I think the response is awesome.
Yeah.
But you know, then there's always like the weird person, you know, thank you, Jesus, thank you. Like, right? And like we have people who just go walk up to those people and go, sit down. And because you're not allowed to take away from someone else's journey.
That's right. Yep. I honestly became very conscious because say one day if CK invites me to his hotel opening and
which he is going to do.
Yes, he is. Then he said, oh, my friend Kevin's going to say something before we officiate this place. And then I say things like, you know, this is such a great hotel because CK is so anointed by the power of God to come up with all these ideas. And I think at that point, everyone will start leaving because they won't understand what I'm saying. Like, so CK, what's anointing? Like, we've not heard this word before.
But everybody knows you wouldn't do that.
I'm learning. I'm really learning. And so I realized something. I really don't have a lot of serious things to talk about when I'm with my wife. I like to make her happy and smile. So I want to ask you, actually I asked you this question on Sunday, and it's a light-hearted question, but you gave such profound answers, and I think they would like to know. So I talk about who's your favorite fashion designer, and you gave an answer that totally blew our mind. Would you like to enlighten this generation who loves fashion?
I don't know what I said.
Okay. So let me do this
Right.
again, as if I've never asked you this question before. You talk about layers of communication. Do you remember that?
Oh, yeah. And one, like, I just gotta say, I love doing life with my son, Aaron.
Yeah.
And I love when we did fashion together, and looking forward to us doing it again. So I'm gonna say, in the future, he's gonna be my favorite fashion designer. And, there you go. But like a lot of the stuff I wear, like right now, Aaron's wearing some pants by a friend of ours, whose his name is Renee. He has a brand called RTH, and he was the designer at Ralph Lauren before. And so like a lot of the pants I was wearing were by Renee.
Yeah.
And Renee had never been to Mosaic when I started wearing his clothes. And one day when I was walking down the street in Hollywood, he literally ran out into the street and grabbed me. And he said, "I've been watching you on Instagram. I love the way you wear my clothes." And then all the jewelry I normally wear, which I don't have on tonight, but I do have this one.
Yeah.
All of it's pretty much designed by a friend of mine named Mayor Cohen. He's an Israeli who's also not a follower of Christ yet. But I just started going into his store and buying pieces over a period of 3 or 4 years and getting to know him until he invited me to an exclusive retreat with him and 150 artists and entrepreneurs, which this necklace is a symbol of. And with some of the founders of Burning Man and people in that kind of world. And while they're rolling up hash and doing mushrooms, I'm spending 3 or 4 hours talking to them about the existence of God and the reality of who Jesus is.
Yeah.
And I'm the only Christian I think they ever invited into that space. And so a lot of like the designs that I wear are not really because they're known designers. They're people that I've built relationships with, people I've connected with. People whose stories I'm also telling because I realize that communication is multi-layered. And it's really weird. When I wear all my jewelry, suddenly I'm communicating to people who usually are from a different culture.
Yeah.
And my wife's like, "Why do you wear all this jewelry?"
Yeah.
Because I didn't used to. And I said, it's because there's this whole tribe of people that I've connected to. And this is the way I communicate to them that you are welcome here.
Wow.
And when I wear certain designs and certain clothes, you're communicating a story to people because your clothes is actually part of your story. If you're tatted up, it's a part of your story. The way you cut your hair or if you shave, and it's the strangest thing. I'm the same person when I shave, but I don't have the same relevance. And so when I grow my beard, all of a sudden, my persona changes in the communication process to the other person.
Yeah.
And so for me, it's all about the story that I need to tell so that Jesus can be found in their story. And that's why I love fashion, because I think it's a part of the way we communicate the human story.
Yeah. Come on. Mind blown. Can I have 1 minute break so that I just digest all this thing in my head? Anybody has any question at all? Tonight, in this place? So would you say you're a chef or a cook?
I knew he wanted me to talk about the difference between a chef and a cook. And I love, anybody watch Chef's Table? Okay, we have a few people. One of my favorite series is Chef's Table. And I'm an aspiring chef who's a cook, and at least with food. But I'm definitely a chef when it comes to church.
Yeah.
And the reason is this, is that when I became a follower of Christ and I got involved in the church and I was taught how you're supposed to do things, I realized, the modern church has been designed by cooks. It's basically McDonald's. It's an assembly line and everybody's burger's the same, everybody's fries the same, everyone's milkshake's the same. And frankly, it doesn't matter what the name of the church is or what the denomination is. When you go in, it's been designed by a cook. And that's why when you ever seen like systems or movements that where churches keeps popping up everywhere,
Yeah.
you just know that's like a lot of cooks. Because it's easier to franchise when you only need a cook. It's much harder to create when you need a chef. And one of the things that you notice about great chefs is that they go all the way back to the original material.
Yeah.
Many chefs grow their own vegetables. They grow their own fruit.
Yeah.
Many chefs are actually part of the process if they cook meats of raising their lambs or whatever it is. And because they begin from the beginning of the process. I was at this church one time as a guest speaker, and right before I spoke, the guy said, introduced me, because remember, it doesn't matter who's up here because the message is always the same. And I wanted to walk out. Because why was I across the country if the message is always the same? I might as well go home, hang out with my wife, hang out with my kids, play basketball, and enjoy life. Because if the message is all the same, why am I here? See, the problem is when the message is all the same, it's because you got a bunch of cooks who are preaching. And they're not paying attention to the original materials and creating a meal. And one of the things we talked about is the church needs to become an expression of a chef where all the ingredients actually matter, and you're creating something that's unique, something where the aromas matter and the design matters and the colors matter and the entire story of that meal matters. The cook doesn't have a story for his burger and fries.
Right.
You know, but when you ask a chef, why did you cook this? He can tell you how the ingredients come from their history or from their background or why he chose this particular seasoning rather than this seasoning. And the church really needs to be led by chefs who are imagining the future of the church and creating something uniquely beautiful for this place.
But we are Asian. Like, you have seen the movie.
You're Asian?
I think so. Am I Asian? But I dream in English though, so I'm not sure what I am. But the struggle is if we want churches to be led by chefs, and being Asian, which means it is harder to produce, it takes longer. But then the restaurants down the road are growing way faster. The numbers doesn't match. So can you enlighten all Asians here? Like, you know, the restaurant down the road is like having more restaurants and you're still figuring out your menu. Am I speaking in a modern language? Trying, man, my God. This Sunday you come to church, you will not know what I'm talking about. We speak in quotes for humanity.
I don't think any chef has ever won or earned a Michelin star who was focused on how many people came to their restaurant.
Yes, sir.
They focused on the experience every person will have when they come into their restaurant. And they trust that the quality of the experience will create a word of mouth. See, the difference is no one's going to travel across the world to eat at this McDonald's. But they will travel across the world to eat at a Michelin.
Yeah.
And so you have to decide. And by the way, I'm glad that there's lots of cooks.
Yeah.
I mean, I don't think that it's not an either or. Most, like, if you look at the church needs a lot of cooks and a lot of, because I don't know about you, but like sometimes I don't want a Michelin meal.
That's true.
I just want a good, solid street food.
Yeah.
Although, you know, but the best is street food that has a Michelin. Right?
Yep.
Like in Singapore.
Yeah.
And I think the key is this.
They copied us. Anyway, sorry.
But you're not competitive at all.
No.
No.
We're not, I'm not Asian. I'm just saying.
Look, I think what you have to ask yourself is, what's the meal you need to cook that will reach people who are not eating at all? Because, like, if there's a church down the street, I know it's just a metaphor, but let's just say there's a church down the street that has thousands and thousands of people, and you're wondering why they're growing faster than you. Not that you would ever wonder that. Okay? The question isn't, are they growing faster than you? The question is, are you doing the hard work of reaching people they will never reach? Right? Because, you know, a lot of times the church that grows faster and bigger is oftentimes the church that's providing people the meal that's most easily accessible.
Yeah.
But there's all these people. See, part of the uniqueness of Mosaic is we made a decision to go after the people and culture who were the artists and high creatives and innovators and entrepreneurs.
Yeah.
We went after a creative and intellectual class of people that would just never walk into a church that's designed by cooks.
Right.
And we see it as our stewardship to reach the people in the world that no one will reach, but they're the ones who create the future of humanity.
Yeah.
See, the problem is that even mega churches, even massive churches, don't reach the people who are creating the future. They're reaching people who are very comfortable in the present or living in the past.
Yeah.
And so I think it's much more important to ask, who are we reaching?
Yeah.
And are we going after the culture creators? Are we going after the people who are going to create the future of KL, the future of Malaysia, the future of Asia? Are we reaching the people that no other church will reach? And if they are not reached, we will not be a part of creating the future.
That's true.
And it's so much more important for you to be the tip of the spear, pioneering the future.
Yeah.
And it's so much easier to hire people when you're IBM. It's easier to hire people when you're looking for managers of a system.
Yeah.
It's much easier, much harder to hire people when you're looking for creators and innovators and pioneers. So you're going to have fewer to work with.
Yeah.
And so I hope you guys blow the roof off. I hope you grow to thousands upon thousands upon thousands. But just don't do it by reaching Christians. Do it by reaching people who are searching for God right now.
Yeah.
And because of you, they come to know Jesus.
Right. I think this last couple of years, personally for me, is a lot of rethinking how we communicate the message of hope, the message of Christ, so that the people are out there and people are truly, the future creators are being influenced by us. And it's been an interesting process, changing our language, changing all that. And so we're really grateful that you are here and imparting so much stuff into our head. And some are still thinking, some are still processing, some are still having headache, the mind is still spinning. And I just want to let you all know, I will listen to pastors talk many rounds every time. When I go to the hospital and wait for the doctor, I'll be listening to it. When I'm driving, I'll be listening to it again and again. The book Last Arrow, every page is like, you know, it takes so long for me to just read one page because I want to read it again and again. You said something really interesting in the book. You say, what you do comes out of who you are, but who you are must exist apart from what you do. Can you enlighten us on that?
Read the book.
I already did many times.
No.
But the way it's sold out, guys. If you didn't get a book, Amazon.com, okay?
No, I think this is also important, like in Asian culture.
Yeah.
And by the way, some of the greatest restaurants in the world are Asian. Some of the greatest chefs in the world are Asian. So don't tell me the problem is that you're Asian. You know, we all have the same problem. The church across the board wants to hold us into the past. People are afraid of the future. And so that's why you have to create it. Yeah. But when I said that, look, everything you do must come out of who you are. Because that's authentic art. That's authentic creation, is when it's an expression of who you are. Yeah. But who you are has to be a part of what you do. And because otherwise your image, your identity, your esteem is going to be enslaved by your success or failure. And so when your identity is completely connected to what you do, your identity is going to be absolutely traumatized.
Yeah.
Because like Mosaic has had huge moments of success and huge moments of failure. We've had moments we've grown and moments we've declined. And people would always, no one ever came to me and asked me, hey, how did you guys decline? But everyone came and asked me, how did you guys grow? Wow. And I would always tell them, I did the same thing while we were growing that we did while we were declining. Because we're committed to the principles of what we're doing, not just to the outcome of what we're doing. Because it comes out of who we are.
Right.
And who we are is not connected to what we do. Because if it was, when we're declining, we think, oh, there's something wrong with me. God's not with me.
Right.
And God was with you while you were declining.
Yes.
And he was pleased with you while you were declining. He may have said, stop declining. No, but he's not more pleased with you when you're growing.
That's right.
He's pleased with you because he loves you.
Yeah.
And so the beautiful thing about it is that we get to celebrate success, but we don't have to be paralyzed by the failures. You have moments where you have a great message, and you can celebrate that, but you're going to have moments just like I do where the message isn't that good. And what I love about being a pastor at Mosaic is they base it on me, not on the moment.
Right.
They go, he's been with us all this time. He's giving his life. He's sacrificing. He's like being faithful. And then you have ups and downs.
Yeah.
So I would say no matter what kind of work you do, like let your work come out of the essence of who you are. Let it be a reflection of your values and your integrity and your passion and your creativity. But don't let your identity be connected to what you do.
Yeah.
So that you can actually go and enjoy life and enjoy your family and enjoy your friends and not feel like, oh, wow, I'm not living up to who I should be.
You guys okay? Come on. This clapping hand is to give me a break to formulate my thoughts to ask some really good question.
I'm going to say something about, is it CK?
CK, yeah.
Yeah, because like when you're talking about the business thing.
Yeah.
Like in the church, when you say to someone, thank you so much, they'll say, oh, don't thank me, thank the Lord. Right?
Yeah.
And like if you do that in the business world, it's kind of weird. Right?
Yeah.
And then in the church, they'll say, oh, no, it wasn't me, it was the Lord. But it wasn't, it was them.
Yeah.
Okay?
Yeah.
Like it's weird. Like people with my books, people will say to me, I loved your book, but I know you didn't write it. I know the Lord wrote it. And I'll like go, no, he wrote another book. And and he wrote that one, and it's better. It's better than mine, okay? And if God had written my book would have been better. It would have been a bestseller. And so we use weird magical language to say, oh, it wasn't me, it was the Lord.
Yep.
See, but in the business world, you wouldn't go, I want to like congratulate CK for building this great hotel, but I know it wasn't him. I know it was the Lord. Everybody would be like, how come he didn't build my building? And so I think some of it is like we need to start thinking through our language.
Yeah.
And be more like I have a solution. Like when someone says thank you so much, instead of saying, oh no, don't thank you, thank Lord, say you're welcome.
Yeah.
See, because that would make you like human.
Yes.
And then when someone does something great, you should say, great job.
Yeah.
Don't say, but I know it wasn't you. And because when I was a new Christian, I would go, thank you so much. They go, no, it wasn't me, it was the Lord. And I go, it looked like you. And that's why I hear all the time, oh, I didn't write this song. Like, Mariah and the team wrote a song called Tremble, and it's gone around the world,
Yeah.
and it's a huge hit. And then people go, no, but, I know you didn't write the song. The Holy Spirit wrote the song. I'm like, no, actually, they wrote the song, and the Holy Spirit inspired them.
Yep. Yeah.
But they wrote the song.
Yeah.
And if the Holy Spirit had written it, it would have been better.
Yes.
It would. I mean, it's a great song.
Yeah.
But it's a human song, worshiping God.
Yeah.
And we need to stop like using superstitious, churchy, Christian-y language, and just go, thank you,
Yeah.
great job, love that you I affirm your talent.
Yeah.
Like, you know, you have a gifting. And we also know that God does things beyond our talent and beyond our gifting and beyond our skills.
Yeah.
And we know that there really is anointing.
Yep.
There really are spiritual gifts.
Yep.
And if we celebrate the human side, it'll be easier to identify when the Holy Spirit is working in a unique and beautiful way.
Awesome. I think we as Asian, it gets a lot more complicated as well, because when we say it's not us, it's the Lord, it's also
false humility.
False humility. Yeah, it's better. Like, can you play the guitar? No, but they play it really well because it looks better.
Right, but what would happen if you went up to them and said, "You're right, you're terrible"?
They will be offended.
Right.
Yeah,
right. Because they didn't really mean it when they said, "I'm not very good."
Yeah, it's actually also part of our school system. I know there are Chinese school teachers here. I just want to tell this story to Pastor. My son came home one day. One of the questions in the homework: it's your dad's birthday. You want to get him a gift. A nice watch. B, a cheap watch. C, nothing. Which one is the answer? You have to buy him a not so nice watch. So church, I think we've been ingrained with some of these things that sometimes after a while make us, unable to communicate with the people around us. And then we become weird.
Buy him the nice watch, okay? And,
Thank you. Thank you.
So the answer is the cheap watch.
Yes. Or if you try to answer the expensive watch, the teacher will come and speak to you.
Wow.
It's a wrong answer.
So you're supposed to answer the cheap watch, but buy the nice watch.
Yes, that's what I've been telling him.
And say, it isn't much. That's all I could do.
Yes. Okay. All right. You guys enjoy yourself? Any question? Anyone would have loved to ask Pastor Erwin a question before he flies out? And
Aaron, is there anything you think we should have covered? I love it. Anyone else?
Are we good? Andrew, come.
I just want to know, like, how do you write this stuff? Like, how do you?
What stuff?
Yeah, like
the human stuff.
How do you arrange? Like, what's your writing process? How do you arrange your thoughts in this way?
Do my thoughts seem arranged?
Yeah, like I think like everything you say is very thoughtful and sort of like in a narrative. But like I don't even.
Your girlfriend is cringing right now. I want to know what's happening there.
Are you guys together?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Because you look
I'm
like
not
you're
sure
not.
I'm not sure they will be after tonight, but.
No, thank you for the question. One is, I think communication should be an art, and it should be poetic, it should be prophetic, it should be beautiful, and it should be profound. And so I've spent my life learning how to communicate in a way where every word matters. So it's not accidental, it's not by chance, it's not random. If I do this well, it's because I've given my entire life with the conviction that if I'm going to speak about Jesus, I should aspire to be the greatest communicator in the world. Not for me, but because he deserves to be communicated at that level. So that's a part of it. And another thing is, it's about wealth of knowledge. If you know a lot about something, you can ramble because you can pull from so many things. And so this conversation could go 1,000 other ways because I'm only talking to you about 1% of what I know about this conversation. And unfortunately, a lot of times people preach and they're preaching 100% above the percent they know. And because of that, they're using cliches. And whenever a preacher is going back to the same thing, it's because they've run out of content. And so it's really important for me to, one, have mastery of the content, and also have mastery of the process of communication. And so I want to know the material, and I want to be able to communicate the message. So when you ask me that question, I consider that a great compliment, because I've been in rooms where it's the atheist who seems to be most thoughtful. It's the humanist who seems to have thought through the issues. And I've been embarrassed because I feel like Christians aren't thoughtful. We seem stupid. And I know that you're not supposed to say that, but it bothers me that I'm a part of a tribe where stupidity is acceptable. And I feel like we have to eradicate room in our faith for shallow thinking. And so part of my goal is to elevate the level of thinking around Jesus. And because I know that we're smarter than we're acting. We've been allowed to be less, so we haven't become more. And like Pastor Kevin's very humble, and he says he's trying to learn the language, and I haven't heard any irrelevant language come out of Pastor Kevin. I only hear relevant, thoughtful, engaging, humorous, insightful language coming out of him. I don't think that's accidental. I think that comes out of his determination to be relevant. Yeah, and then I write books in a really kind of an odd way. I write books super fast, and so I count the hours in which it takes me to write a book. And so like I wrote a book called The Barbarian Way in 10 hours, and I wrote The Last Arrow in maybe 27 hours. And a lot of it is because I try to remember everything. I'm constantly learning. I'm constantly grabbing. I'm constantly gaining things. You have to be a voracious learner, observer of life. I've learned so much while I've been here. I've learned so much from Esther. I've learned so much from Kevin. I've learned so much from every person. And I'll take that and I'll absorb that, and it'll be a part of who I am. And so I become aware of that, over a lifetime. And so the same way, when I write a book, I have all this universal thought that's already there. And so when I'm preaching, I'm not going from A to B to C to D at all. When I'm preaching, I'm looking at a universe of thoughts, and I pull down Mars, and then I pull down Venus, and I pull down the sun. And that's why there's no two messages that are the same. So, and that's exciting to me, because that means that I know everyone can become better.
Yeah.
A lot of it is just committing yourself to mastery, to becoming great at something. And when I first started preaching, no one thought I would be any good. And when I first began this, my mom looked at me and says, what is God going to do with you? I was not extroverted. I never spoke. I was not a communicator. A lot of this is, I didn't care if I was bad. I just wasn't going to stay bad. I said, I pray, God, don't make me boring. Don't let me be boring.
Yeah.
That was bottom line. And I just determined, I'm going to get better and better at this because I want my friends to come to know Jesus.
Yeah.
And it's just the drive inside of us all, I think.
So guys, if you want to finish your assignment quick, you don't need to update your Facebook, your Instagram, your Twitter. Just do your assignment, okay? But the other very unconventional way, the way you speak, Pastor, it's and which is distressing the media team, because there's no sermon title. And so is it deliberate, or there is no title, or is there a game plan behind that? So because the way I speak is, hi guys, this weekend I'm continuing on this series called ABC. Let's start with A. But you don't seem to have that title. We don't even have slides. And they're upset. They have no slides to take picture to post on Instagram. There's a demand for that. I'm sorry. They made me ask this question.
Every great movie begins with, let us tell you what this movie is all about. And then before you get into the movie, I want to tell you what 3 scenes are going to be really awesome. And before we get into the movie, I want to tell you how the movie is going to end. Because the most exciting movies in the world are the ones that are completely predictable. And woo!
Ouch!
Why would you read a novel if in the first 10 pages you knew everything that was going to happen? Like, my favorite book of all time was probably Catcher in the Rye, that you suffer through just to get to the last image when he says, I'm the catcher in the rye. And when I got to that last image, every page that seemed to go nowhere was worth every second that I plodded through it, because it took me someplace unexpected. I do titles because, like, when Aaron reminds me to, and my team reminds me, and so I'll give them a title because it'll help. But I always say, don't put the title up until after I say it.
Yeah.
And I have structure in my mind, but see, I think a sermon should look more like the human body. The structure is hidden underneath the flesh.
Listen, guys.
And right, because it's the warmth of the human flesh that connects us. If we were bones and we were holding hands, it just wouldn't be romantic. It'd be clingy, like, clingy. And I think most sermons are so predictable because they go, my message tonight is on the mystery. My 3 points are, there's mystery. The mystery is God.
Right.
And I'm like, there's no mystery to this talk. And so yes, I don't want you to know where I'm going. I want you to think I don't know where I'm going. I want you to be going, where is he going? Wow. I want to tell so many stories that don't seem to be connected. At the very end, I want to pull them together and you go, oh, that's where he was taking us. And so the more I can create surprise, for me, that's the wonder of communication.
Yes.
And it's harder.
It is.
And I don't recommend it for everyone. I think you have to start with, today's talk is, and
I think I'm ready to move away from that because I've been doing this for like 20 years.
And I like titles. I do think the titles are good.
Yeah.
But I don't think you need to say, today I'm talking about.
Yeah.
When you study like art, I remember one time they had an apple and it said, this is art. And then it had the word apple and it said, this is art, or this is design and this is design. Then it had an apple with the word apple and it said, this is not design. See, preaching for us is like, we have an apple, then we write apple. Because we're not sure they're going to know it's an apple. All right? And I think, like, you have to decide. You're going to write apple or you're going to paint an apple.
Yeah.
But if you're doing both, you kind of lost your way.
That's right.
And so I didn't really, I all I had was Bible. I don't have like notes, but, oh, I don't mean that. Like, notes are great. Notes are awesome.
Yeah.
Okay. What I'm saying is like for me, it was like tonight was just me rambling, and I asked Aaron, hey, yell 52 hertz if I forget. Because I thought I might forget it. Because I wanted to talk about 52 hertz.
Yep.
I wanted to talk about the loneliest whale in the world. And by the way, for most of my life, I felt like the loneliest Christian in the world.
Yep.
I felt like I didn't have a tribe. And a part of the reason I started Mosaic is I wanted to create a tribe for people who wanted to live on the cutting edge, but didn't want to be there alone. Mm-hmm. And so for me, our mission is finding all the 52 hertz in the world and bringing us together. And so they're like the images stay with me, and so then you're unwrapping that. And so when you're talking about the structure, I think structure is great. And I especially think it's really important when you're starting to preach.
Yep.
And I think as you develop more and more, your structure should be there, but it should be hidden. and you're revealing it. And people, they usually don't take notes with me. You know, they try. You know?
I did.
But it's hard to take, I understand it's hard to take notes with me. Because I don't really want you, I want to teach you things, but I want to change the way you see reality more. So I'm trying to change the way you see what's real, not to take notes within what you see as real. There's a difference. And I want you to have encounters with God. So what's more important to me is creating moments where you and God have a conversation.
Yes.
And so I'm trying to find ways of creating those moments where I'm almost less important to the moment as the speaker.
Cool. Cool. Okay, time is almost up.
Bad movie.
Bad movie.
You're watching thinking, why am I here? Right?
Yep.
Bad movie. Good movie. You're watching, but you know you're watching a movie. You know what I'm talking about?
Yep.
Great movie. You forgot you're at a movie. You're in a story.
And with that brilliant moment, we call it a night. Good night, guys. Thank you.
Good night.